Production funding for this program is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
She's a clinical psychologist specializing in infant mental health and the treatment and assessment of trauma across the lifespan. We have a lot to learn. Let's have a conversation with Dr. Mindy Cronenberg. So let's start going from Memphis to St. Louis to Louisiana, back to Memphis.
Back home.
How did you get into this world of infant mental health?
I had always been interested in working with young children. I always knew I wanted to be a psychologist. And I was doing my graduate work at the University of Memphis, and I applied to a lot of predoctoral programs. You have to do that to get your doctorate, and I wanted to make sure I got in somewhere, so I applied a lot of places, and one of them was LSU Health Sciences Center. I was taking the train to do my interview, and like all people who get prepared to do an interview, I was looking up the people I was going to interview with. And I looked up Dr. Joy Osofsky, and that was the very first time I heard the term infant mental health. She was going to be the next year's president of the 0 to 3 National Organization for Infants and Toddlers. And I was fascinated. I had never heard of it. It seemed a little bit odd to have infant and mental health. But luckily, I got to go to LSU for my doctorate. I ended up staying there for 8 years. I had wanted to come right back to Memphis, but I realized there was so much to learn. I got to work with, through the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, I got to work with colleagues in California who do child-parent psychotherapy for children and their families 0 to 5 who have experienced trauma. So I do that and I train in that. And finally I came back here, back home. I've gotten to work with the Early Success Coalition. Sandra Allen from Le Bonheur and Keisha Walker. I've gotten to work with Project Launch. It's a federal grant to promote social and emotional development. And we've even started an infant mental health association in Tennessee.
Well, so we have a lot to unpack there. Let's start though with the very basics.
Okay.
How do you define infant mental health?
It's really just social and emotional development in young children. I think a lot of times when you say mental health, you think of mental illness, but it's health, it's social and emotional development, and we all have it. So with young children, it's really important to think about children in the context of relationships. So it's how they can express and regulate their emotions. It's how they can form relationships and begin to build trust. And then through those relationships, they can begin to explore the environment and learn. And all of this, like I said, is in families and then in the context of their community and culture.
And I know that when you look at all the research, I mean, and I'll let you talk about it scientifically, but you know, that age 0 to 3, and then you start getting into the even, you know, by the 3rd grade, they're having to learn how to read and then read to learn. I mean, there's so many very interesting benchmarks across the ages, but talk about how the brain develops, and especially at an early age.
I really find it fascinating. Babies come in the world ready to learn, and they don't need much. They need healthy nutrition, they need safe environments, and they need adults to set up that environment so they can learn. Babies come in with their own temperament. They come in bringing the way that they're going to relate. Are they really sensitive? Are they feisty? Are they more shy? So they come in as little human beings.
So does that come from mother and father and combination
It comes all sorts of genetics, things that happen in utero, yeah, all sorts of things.
Gotcha.
And so they bring that, and then they bring in this readiness to learn. I find this statistic absolutely amazing, no matter how long I say it. Every second, children are creating 700 connections between neurons. So if they look at something, and then if mom or dad or grandma notices that their brain is just exponentially developing.
I mean, 700 a second.
A second. It's fascinating.
But even on that though, so if they don't use them, they lose them. Is that correct?
Right. So what happens is you have too many. You develop too many connections. And of course, that's given a healthy environment where you can develop. If a baby is not stimulated, they may not develop. But if they are stimulated, develop too many. And we call it the use it or lose it principle. The ones that are kept are the ones that are used. So we want to help children feel safe, use their connections that are focused on learning versus maybe things like protecting themselves or keeping themselves safe.
There's a lot of interesting concepts and even phrases like angel in the nursery. Describe some of those, ghost in the nursery. I mean, there's some interesting kind of buzzwords and phrases, but describe what some of those mean when you talk about the concepts.
Okay, so infant mental health is a relatively new field. The term wasn't really used till the 1970s, and right before that there was a whole bunch of research on attachment. And all babies are born ready to attach, and it's for their safety. Babies are born pretty defenseless, and they need adults to take care of them. So babies are gonna come into the world and find a person who's bigger and stronger than they are, who they can connect to. And they build an attachment. Hopefully it's a healthy and secure attachment. Sometimes it's not, and that's one of the things we do in psychotherapy is to help create that secure attachment. But they learn from the beginning of life a baby will cry and a caregiver will respond. And this happens thousands and thousands of times. The baby cries, the caregiver responds. Sometimes the caregiver might say, wait a minute, and it might take a second. Sometimes the caregiver may not always respond immediately. But over and over and over from these experiences, babies begin to learn what the world is like. They learn that people are going to meet my needs. If I cry, the world is a good enough place that I'm going to be protected and people are trustworthy. And then they realize I am important. If I cry, I can make something happen and people will take care of me.
So the self-confidence at an early age is being formed.
Exactly. So one of the things that can get in the way of helping babies form those healthy attachments is a caregiver who has not necessarily had their own healthy attachment. A lot of times we parent the way we were parented. And not everybody, some people will say, okay, I remember being parented that way, I do not want to do it this way. But a lot of times it's just natural for us. So that's what we call a ghost in the nursery. If a caregiver maybe didn't have somebody who responded to them, they may act that way and they may probably not notice it. All I would say caregivers want to do the very best for their child. But sometimes those ghosts, things they don't even know, will get in the way and have a hard time helping the child and caregiver have that responsive dance.
See, it's interesting just even on that because you think, you know, as you grow up, the baggage that you claim or bring, you know, because based on your childhood, your development, and then you think, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't respond because I wasn't responded to and they'll figure it out. All of these things that come in, I mean, I can see how it could be a very tough task at hand to be able to teach parents and organizations, daycare workers, these are the right things to do at the right time so that the child has the best support necessary.
It is. There's a term. Winnicott was a pediatrician in the 50s and 60s who was really important to the field of infant mental health. And there are two quotes that people often talk about. One, he says there's no such thing as a baby. He talks about when you're talking about a baby, it's always in the context of a relationship. Babies actually won't survive if they're not related to, spoken to. The food, shelter, that instrumental care isn't even enough. They need that interaction, that nurturing, that skin-to-skin contact. So that's really important, but he also has another phrase, he says, good enough parenting. And none of us can be perfect. In fact, we can't. Nobody is perfect. So we always have ruptures. It's in the repair. There are going to be times where you can't respond to your baby. But it's coming back. As long as you don't have a rupture that lasts, that doesn't end, you can repair.
Well, and I think that's a good segue into the work you do with trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, seeing parents argue, going through a divorce, witnessing, especially for some of the inner city kids, to see someone, a loved one die, pass away, be shot. I mean, these can be very traumatic moments in a child's life. Talk about how some of that, you know, we've got the good enough and do as best we can,
yes.
But sometimes very bad things happen. Talk about how that parlays over to trauma and the work you do there.
Absolutely. I think that we spend a lot of time wanting and wishing to believe that infancy and early childhood is a time of innocence and just all goodness. And because it's so hard to think that little babies can be hurt. But in reality, it's really important for us to recognize that babies can be hurt. On one hand, babies are very resilient. People are resilient, and they don't need expensive toys. They don't need expensive teach your baby to read. They need interaction. They need somebody to talk to them. But they are affected by negative experiences and can be even more impacted by negative experiences than somebody who's older. That's because of the rate that their brain's developing, and remember that experience-dependent brain.
Processing and reflecting or able to.
Right, it's just scariness. There's scariness around me. I know what my body feels scared, the parts of my brain that are associated with fight or flight, that's what's working. And because I don't have words or language, it's even harder for me to feel safe. I don't have those coping skills yet.
How, especially for a family going through that, obviously that's where having a psychologist that can really step in and focus on those, but for families who are going through this and you're starting to already see, or you know it's going to have an effect, what do you even do at that point?
I think the first thing is to recognize it. A lot of people, and I'll use the example of domestic violence, they'll say, oh, the baby can't hear, or I make sure I put the baby in a different room and close the door, and that's a good step, making sure the baby's not there. But we also know that babies, even if they're in the other room, they're very aware of their surroundings because again, they don't have the ability to defend themselves. So they have to be exquisitely aware of what's going on around them. What kind of mood is mom in? What kind of mood is dad in? Even if they're asleep, there's research that shows that their stress response is going on because that stuff is going on around them. So I think the first thing is being aware, working with people to make sure that you're safe and that you get your baby safe. Children can be in unsafe environments. We don't want that, but if we have a caregiver who is what we call a protective shield, it at least helps. That caregiver experiences the world, that child experiences the world through their caregiver. Right. So they'll experience and know what's going on, but at least they'll know, okay, I know that this person is here to keep me safe.
So let's talk about, there's so much going on. I want to make sure we at least cover enough to be dangerous in terms of all the good stuff going on here in the Mid-South too. But I think it's really important for you to share some of the tips, because I think there's, you hear the read, play, talk. I mean, some of these dynamics to be able to interact, because we're talking, it's like everything is built around interaction, building those relationships, building those synapses and connections. Exactly. But talk about some of the tips that, when you're out doing speaking and working with organizations, whether it's to parents, caregivers, all the above, what are some tips to really build the best successful platform for your child to develop?
The most important thing, and it sounds simple, but I think it's one of the hardest things, is be there. Be there with your baby. Look at your baby, like you said, talk to your baby. Babies learn who they are from how we interact with them. Sometimes, especially if we're stressed, it's hard to think about another person. We call that reflective capacity. We need to think about where we are. How am I feeling? How am I responding? If a baby's cry triggers me, I need to know that so that I can take a few deep breaths and calm myself before I get that baby. Because again, babies learn to regulate by being held by us. They can't regulate themselves, but we hold them, we're calm, and they learn, okay, it's gonna be okay. So the first thing is really taking care of yourself. And if you take care of yourself, then you can truly be available to take care of your child. So
you mean put the cell phone down, don't be interact and focus. What about nutrition and some of those things? I mean, I know that, as you said, they've got to be fed obviously and have the support. There's a physical element to this too. Are there certain things that you recommend on that? I mean, obviously healthy better, but are there certain things that you look for there related to the mental health?
Well, we know that healthy diets, vitamin D creates the myelin around those synapses, the things that help our brains process information faster. So obviously we want a healthy diet, we want safe environments. So infant mental health is about working with the caregiver and the child, but we also need to take a step back and from a policy perspective, think about how our communities are. So we're all responsible for the baby. It takes a village, as people talk about. We need to make sure that we invest enough in our communities because then we're investing in our children. So creating the safe spaces. Memphis has done a really good job. The Adverse Childhood Experiences study showed us just how much trauma adults had experienced as children, and it really opened our eyes, and the study was replicated in Memphis, to how much has happened to parents who were once children and now to those children.
Right.
Memphis has used that. We want to respond to that. The ACEs Awareness Foundation has created universal parenting places. We're working through the new Association of Infant Mental Health in Tennessee. We're working on developing the workforce and having everybody learn about infancy, about attachment.
Because these are new things that now, you've got Porter-Leith that just launched their early Head Start program, but a big part of that is training the workers to go into the daycares and making sure that they're best in class. You've got endorsements now that'll be taken care of, so that's kind of like a certification, so you know when you see this endorsement that that's someone who's gone through the training, that's getting continuing education. Talk about some of those things, because you have this huge early success initiative, which WKNO is a part of. You also have PBS nationally that has rolled out this whole network focused on children and television and programs that are focused on brain development and all of those skills. So I think we as a nation, but also we as a city, are really intunely focused on, okay, what can we do to help our citizens, to help our kids thrive?
So like what Porter-Leith is doing, creating quality services, they're serving as a exemplary site for other teachers to come in and see what to do. Teachers, I think it's important for child care providers to realize how important they are. They're forming our future citizens.
Right, they're on the front lines.
Exactly. So helping teachers learn to develop those secure attachments with the babies, and helping them learn to watch the baby, see what that baby is interested in, and then do what's called serve and return. Babies will often put something out there. They'll look at something, and then the mom, dad, whoever's caring for the child or the child care provider will look at it, and they'll say, oh, that's a cup. And the baby will begin to relate cup and what they see. So that's one of the ways.
It's kind of like a tennis analogy. Serve it, return it.
Exactly. And we're adding just a little bit more.
Right.
But we want to see what the child is interested in, and because they're, like I said, they're ready to learn. We want to talk to them, like I said, read to them as they look at books. They'll see, okay, their letters. We want to start to do some of those pre-academic skills, but in a way that's fun and interesting. We want kids to be able to run and jump, and as they're jumping, you can count, 1, 2, 3.
Well,
so
the combination of even a physical, like running or jumping or whatever it is, combined with the learning numbers and reciting those, all those where it becomes a full package and fun.
Fun, so that when they do begin school, they'll want to learn. It doesn't just magically happen. We have to give babies a pencil. So it's hard to, you don't necessarily want to give a young child a crayon, because, so we need supervision. But let them begin to hold that. At first they'll hold it in their fists. Later they'll use their fingers. They'll begin to develop. So we need to give them, again, doesn't have to be expensive, but just basic tools so that they can begin to develop skills.
Well, even I've got to imagine like watching television, especially, if you're watching the kids' programming, not just leaving it there. So in other words, watching it with them, asking them about what they saw. I mean, I think, I've learned a ton just by realizing you can go into an art museum, for instance, and know nothing about art, but you can go in there and say, what do you see? And for you and your child to sit there and just say why they see what they see and the story that they think is being told, it's a great bonding opportunity, but it's a great learning experience on both sides. And very similar to what you're talking about, whether it's reading a book, watching television, don't just leave it there. It's how do you engage them in the learning process so that it's fun, but also they're learning.
Right, and I think if parents can understand, as much as children love Elmo, and children love Elmo, yes, they love you even more. And so if you watch Elmo and you're saying, look at Elmo's red, or Elmo's happy, or sometimes Elmo's sad. So it's taking that extra step, watching together.
It's funny, we were out at Porter-Leith just doing a volunteer day, and we were doing the Elmo shuffle and the Elmo dance, and you're right, they loved it, but even more so, they loved that the teacher and the volunteers, we were in there dancing with them. So exactly. Very, very true. So as we start to wrap up, what makes you excited when you look at what's going on here in the Mid-South? focused on infant mental health, what's one or two things that you think this is how we're getting it right, but this is how we also need to keep pushing?
I think that we are in a really cool time, especially in our state, that people have gotten it. They recognize how important this early development is. People are talking about serve and return. People know how fast babies' brains are developing. People are ready to invest in babies. So we have our new Association for Infant Mental Health in Tennessee. I'm so excited about our endorsement system. And infant mental health is not just for clinicians, it's not just for therapists, it's for anybody who touches the lives of babies. So as we roll out our endorsement, and it's gonna take a little while, but as we roll it out, it's not just for psychologists, it's also for daycare providers.
Well, even churches, I've got to believe that they have their daycares that they provide as well.
Right, early interventionists, pediatricians, judges, policymakers, people who sit at the front desk and to interact with babies. It's so we can understand and learn how important these relationships are. So I'm so excited about having a workforce who can really support the baby and also support the parent. I think it's so important that we remember there's a concept in infant mental health called the parallel process. And I think of it as nesting dolls. We learn how to treat others through how we're treated. So I need a supervisor and an agency who supports my work. Then I can support the caregivers. When caregivers are supported, and that might be one of the first times they've really gotten support, somebody to really listen, then they're able to support that for their child, and then we can only imagine what that child's going to be like as they grow.
Well, in a way, it's a little bit like the butterfly effect, where
Exactly.
every move you make, everything has an enduring kind of exponential effect further down, the ripple effect. And so the ability to help you to then help somebody else, to then help somebody else, and next thing you know, really good things happen.
Exactly.
So how can the public help? I mean, I think obviously as parents, doing everything in your power to raise your kids in the right way possible. But I think you kind of even said it too before, is that they may not be our biological children, but they're all our children. So these are our future leaders. This is our future workforce. It's in all of our best interest to give each of these children the best possible avenue for a bright future. How can the public kind of help in what you're doing?
Awareness, sensitivity. Like I said, it's as basic and as hard as taking care of yourself, so that then you can think about the experience of the other. If I'm run into somebody and I have a nice conversation with them, how is that going to affect their experience? And then what's going to happen when they go home to their child? Supporting and advocating for good environments for children, for quality pre-K, for things like what WKNO is doing, and recognizing that that's going to help our whole community. It's going to be beneficial to us. And
I think even going back to the good, you see organizations like Books from Birth, Shelby County Books from Birth, where they're trying to make sure that literally every child that comes home from that hospital, 0 to 3, is getting a book so that the parents can sit down and learn. I think, to your point, so much attention now is being focused on infant mental health, and how can we as our community really rally behind this in a big way. So what are some websites, what are some, obviously watching this show over and over again to get those good tips, but what are some places that we can go to learn more, to follow these conversations, to continue our evolution and growth, and even for those endorsements that are being put out there, how do we find that information?
National Organization for 0 to 3, 0to3.org has lots of information for both parents and professionals. National Child Traumatic Stress Network, nctsn.org, has a special part of their website dedicated to 0 through 5. Looking at the Early Success Coalition website, the Association for Infant Mental Health in Tennessee, their website it's in the development stage, but there's a little bit on there, and you can sign up for more information. And looking for trainings, the Urban Child Institute has some great information as well.
When you look at the work that you're doing, what do you hope your legacy is in all of this, especially at a local level? Because I mean, you're on the front lines, but you're on the front lines not only in this sort of role of advocating, but awareness and spreading the good, but you're also behind the scenes doing all the research. What do you hope that when you look at kind of the work you're doing, what do you hope that the impact is?
That people begin to think about babies. We talk about holding the baby in mind. When they see a baby, really think about how much is going on. When they see another person, think about how we impact each other, and that we take care of ourselves, that professionals receive supervision, we call it reflective supervision, receive what they need so that they can provide that care. Like I said, it's that trickle-down effect. So if we are using the term infant mental health in our community and have that knowledge of how much relationships are important, and then having that other knowledge of you really need to take care of yourself, I would be very happy.
Very nice. I'm just curious, what's the most recent book you've read?
There's a book I'm in the middle of. It's by Alison Gopnik, and it's called The Gardener and something. I can get that information to you. It's a great book about child development. Nice.
And the last question, what do you like to do to relax?
Be with my family, be with my dogs and cats, talk to friends, self-care.
Perfect. Well, I love everything you're doing. I greatly appreciate it. I know that coming on TV was something you were a little bit afraid of, but you do a lot of speaking out there, and so we wanted to have you come on and share your knowledge with the world. And it's absolutely fascinating what is going on here. Like you said, and like we even talked about, there is a lot of good, but I think there's also too a lot of things in the works that's exciting for our city and our community. So one last time, tell them the websites and just the basic information of where to go.
Early Success Coalition is a local website where you can get information, and Association of Infant Mental Health in Tennessee.
Well, we greatly appreciate it, and thank you everyone for watching A Conversation with Dr. Mindy Cronenberg.